Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell, and today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who is concerned about how much money her partner makes. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
No, we're not. We're not professionals. We are not trained in any of this. So please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to share our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs on the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love.
All right, let's get into today's letter. Today's letter comes from a true a-hole whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing from the depths of capitalism. First, thank you so much for your podcast. You've offered so much guidance and fun to my life over the past year. It's hard for me to write this question because I feel ashamed of myself. I'm thinking of breaking up over money. About a year ago, I met a wonderful man. He's kind, intelligent, super hot, fun, and he makes me feel like a goddess. We talk so openly about everything, including our relationship needs and hangups. In short, this is the best relationship I've ever had in my 46 years around the sun. But recently, a fly has come into the ointment, and it is the one thing I have a very hard time talking to him about. When we started dating, I had a certain understanding of his financial situation, which was that we basically earned the same amount, but he earned somewhat more. However, recently I have come to learn that he actually makes a bit less, and I am ashamed to say that this has started to change my feelings for him and our long-term prospects. I've started thinking about breaking up, and when I examine that, it really seems like money is the only reason why. We've kind of talked about my financial concerns, but I can't really talk about it directly, like, I don't think you make enough money for me, because that just seems like the biggest a-hole thing to say ever. And also, where do you go from there? I want to give a little more context here. I live in a really expensive city, and I can't leave for family and work reasons. I have 2 kids from my failed marriage, and my ex, while a caring and responsible father, has recently been hit financially through no fault of his own. His historically stable work has almost disappeared, and he is faltering. My own work has also been feeling less than certain, although I am still doing okay. So for these reasons, I'm feeling economic anxiety in a way that I never have before. So that's the ground I'm standing on, but I just don't know what to make of these feelings I'm having about money in terms of my new relationship. Should I try and let them go and accept my partner where he's at? Or just accept that a certain level of financial wealth is one of the things that I need in my partner and break up because my current partner lacks that? I've had a terrible history of romantic relationships. My first long-term relationship turned into a toxic, almost abusive situation that took me years to walk away from. My second, with the person I married, then divorced, was also something I doubted before we married. My feelings of doubt now are similar to those, but the substance is very different. Back then, my thoughts were because my partner seemed ambivalent about me, or our relationship turned out to be true. And I knew that we didn't have a lot of common interests. But I swallowed those doubts because I wanted a partner, and I believed I couldn't do better because I had zero self-confidence. Since then, I have done a lot of contemplative practice and therapy and grown in confidence and self-awareness. So when it comes to relationships, I do not want to swallow doubt anymore. But I can also see objectively that my doubts are now about something, I don't know, kind of gross. Wanting a partner with more money than me is something that I don't want to admit aligns with my values. And I think that this desire is forced on me by our awful capitalist hellscape. But also it feels like a real need and desire that I have, and I don't want to just ignore it. I have spent too much time ignoring my needs and desires. Does that make sense? A lot of advice I've gotten from friends is, well, just keep going as you have been, just date him. But the truth is, I don't want that, and I know that he doesn't either. He has told me he wants to live together, and the way he talks about my kids, I know he imagines being their stepdad. Just an aside, he has an adult daughter, and he hasn't met my kids yet. They are elementary aged, and I'm slow rolling that step until I'm sure. But I know he is a great dad and would be an amazing role model for my own kids. Anyway, I also want to find someone to live with, grow old with, and I can see him being that person. We're not rushing. Our conversations about living together are on about a 3 to 5 year time horizon. But at the same time, if that is what we want and I'm having these doubts, isn't it better to break up sooner rather than later so we can both find a better match? And even as I say that, I hear a voice in my head say, I'm chasing some fantasy and I will never find anyone better than him. Is that my self-doubting voice or the voice that puts his value as a person and partner above his financial worth? I am so lost in all of this. One of my favorite books has always been Pride and Prejudice, which someone once said was basically real estate porn. I guess it really sunk deep into my psyche, that one. Anyway, thanks for being there, and thanks for your musings. Yours, a true asshole.
Aww. Well, thank you so much for writing, for listening, and for trusting us with this question. I can tell it's really weighing on your heart and confusing you, and I think you're totally right. This is a product of many different things. It's the capitalistic hellscape that we live in that forces us to require a certain amount of money to access, healthcare, ease of living, experiences, everything, literally everything, food, and to care for our children. And it's also, I think, as you said, a product of a previous relationship history that is riddled with not really trusting your instincts, not really prioritizing your own needs. And now you're having this big reaction to your partner's lesser income, and it's triggering all the same feelings, and it's triggering some anxiety. And we're going to talk about how to validate that anxiety, and also how to put things into, how would I describe this? Maybe like a perspective. Giving you our perspective. There we go. We're going to give you our perspective. But we're also going to validate these anxieties that you have and your feelings, and talk about what sort of future we see for your relationship. But first, we're going to take a very quick break.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. So I think, having read through your letter, I just want to assure you, you're not an asshole for being concerned about money, for having money anxiety, especially given the precarity of your current situation with your, your co-parent losing their work, and, your own sort of concerns about your own work. All of what Sierra said is true before we went into the break, which is that, yes, we live in a place where you need money in order to do the things that you need to do to live. That is a very real situation that is happening here. And money anxiety is really intense, right? And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that when you haven't experienced it in a while, or you've never experienced it. But, this anxiety that happens when we sort of look at changed finances, or the inability to take care of ourselves, take care of our families, that's really, really real. And so want to name that, and name that money anxiety is absolutely justified given the capitalist system that we live in. And also sometimes our money anxiety can blind us from what is actually true or real or happening, right? The idea that there isn't enough money coming in versus what's coming out can be really challenging for us, especially if we are, somebody who hasn't had a lot of experience talking about or thinking about money, especially in relationships, right? Where we have to actually get into some uncomfortable and crunchy conversations about it. So I just want to name that is real, and also that it might be louder than it needs to be, because money stuff comes with so much fraught things about our value as people, or our experiences with not having enough money, all of the different ways in which that can kind of be triggered by the different things that are happening around us. So what I want to encourage you to think about as you're thinking about some of this money anxiety is, what would it look like for you to have a conversation with your current partner about what a future budget would look like given the income that you two have, right? And I want you to talk about this really logistically, really materially. I want you to talk about how much money do we have coming in? What are the expenses that we need to take care of that we can anticipate based on how, what's coming up for our kids? What sort of place do we want to live? How much would rent look like for us if we needed to rent a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, right? Or what does home ownership look like? Whatever the things are, I want to build up the practice of talking about money in a material way, because I think that what's happening here is that the symbolic and relational pieces that are happening around money, right? What does money mean to you? And also what does money mean about your relationship with him, are kind of getting conflated with the reality of the money situation, right? Because I think it's probably not actually about how much money he makes and whether or not you two are going to be able to afford a life together, but more about the symbolism behind it, which is maybe that you expected your partner to make more than you, right? Like the gendered dynamics that exist around the idea that the man is supposed to be the breadwinner. Or it might be a relational thing that's coming up, which is that, like, I don't know, like, if we are capable of having conversations like this, or what does this mean about us as a couple, given the fact that we're not making as much as I thought we were going to? Does that mean that our lifestyle is going to look different? Does that mean that the dynamics between us are going to be more fraught, right? Like, that kind of stuff is happening, and everything's getting conflated together in a really big sort of like messy anxiety producing thing in your head. So I want to like tackle what I think is probably going to be the easiest piece of this, which is like having some really material conversations about what does a future or current budget look like for the two of you, given how much money both of you make.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I want to like sort of tacking on to the sentiment. I'm really curious about where these anxieties are coming from, and not that they're unfounded. I think, like I said before, the capitalistic hellscape that we live in, also, you know, living in an expensive city, having children, also coming from a marriage. Like, I'm curious about what sort of burdens have you had to take on? What sort of history of financial, you know, irresponsibility have you seen or witnessed or been a part of? Like, it seems like I'm reaching here, but I feel like you might have had to keep things afloat, right? Like that you might be the captain of this family ship. You might be, you might feel solely responsible for providing in a way because of whatever reasons, you know, because of whatever circumstances that have fell upon you. And that might be leading to making these feelings bigger. You know, I feel like I'm curious about the anxiety that you have about him making less money, because like, does he have a history of financial irresponsibilities? Are you seeing red flags that you're not naming to us? Do you have a history of it? Do you have a history of it with your ex or whatever? I feel like examining this anxiety and why it would lead you to end a relationship that you love it'll help you navigate some of these feelings. We either need to right size these feelings. We either need to be like, listen, I have experienced this before. I've experienced poverty before. I've experienced financial scarcity before. I don't want to do it again. Or my children have certain needs, or I have a certain living standard or whatever. We either need to right size it and be like, this is valid. This is real. This is coming from a real place. Or we need to like downsize them or put them on the right platform to say like, hey, I am anxious about this. I'm anxious how we can navigate this financial terrain together, but it's not worth ending this relationship over.
Yeah. And I also like, for a while I was in a leadership training cohort where we talked a lot about values. And one of the things that I think was really interesting about somebody else in the program, who was actually one of the leaders of it, was that he was talking about how he had a lot of experience growing up in like very unstable places. And that like the beginning of his career in like creating a family and, you know, having kids was also like very financially unstable, and that created a lot of anxiety for him. And so one of his values that he had to realize was true for him was stability. Like finding stability was one of the values that he was looking for. And he had some like deep feelings about the guilt around it, right? Where it's like, am I saying that I just want money? Right. And actually what was happening was that he he didn't actually want money. What he wanted was to make sure that his life and the life of his kids and the life of his family didn't experience the like big swings of up and downs that he had experienced in his early life. And so when he was making decisions about like what sort of careers he wanted to pursue, how he wanted to spend his money, right, the things that he wanted to do with his life, one of the things that he thought a lot about was stability, which was not just about like how much money I'm making, but also like, are we going to move apartments or not, right? Are we going to go on that big long trip or not, right? Was thinking about how can I make sure that I feel stable so that I can be the best and most supportive parents and partner to the people in my life, right? And I think maybe reframing it in that way might help you think about this less as like, oh my God, am I freaking out about the fact that my partner makes less? Or can you think about, okay, if my value is about providing stability for me and for my kids who have been through a bunch of things that were pretty destabilizing, am I capable of providing stability with this partner, right? Am I capable of doing that, right? Instead of thinking about like, how much does he make and like, what is it compared to mine, right? Is this person with his temperament, with how much money he makes, with the way that he treats me and my family, with the values and the goals that we have for our relationship, can this provide stability for me and my family, monetarily, spiritually, emotionally, right? Like all of those different things. Because I think that might feel like a different conversation for you than thinking just about money, right? Like that feels more holistic. That feels much more of like a values-driven conversation and might relieve some of this like anxiety that you're feeling specifically about money, partially because, like I said, money is just like so fucking fraught all the time that like, what does it look like to have a different conversation about what you're actually looking for, which I don't think is money, but more so the ability to live the life that you want for you and for your kids.
Yeah. And, you know, it sounds like you really like this person and you could see merging your life beyond this one thing. But maybe your paths are taking different directions. Maybe you are feeling and seeing things that we're not seeing. And I think only you can decide how to weigh this in your life and how you want to handle this moving forward. I will say, I feel as though sometimes money anxiety, and this is privileged even to say out loud because it's like there's a difference between money anxiety and actual money scarcity, you know? But I'll say sometimes I think financial anxiety strips us of the ability to access, you know, the immediate moment, our true desires, not just our how are we going to get to the next day, or like how are we going to survive this capitalistic game that we have to play. It's like the fucking Hunger Games, but you just have to pay a mortgage or rent forever. You know what I mean?
For sure. For sure.
And I will just say, to help you make this decision, think about what it would look like. Okay, so what if you did figure out this financial landscape together and you were together for 10 years? What would you think about money then? Or 30 years from now? Or what? I'm trying to ultimately say, what are you going to value at the end of your life without saying, what are you going to value at the end of your life? Because I know that as a caretaker, you know, as a citizen, that money is necessary. Like, you need to be able to provide for your family and for yourself. And also, I want to say, like, it sounds like you really like this guy. It sounds like there's more here at play.
Yep.
Or how about this? I hope that there's more here at play than he doesn't make enough money for me. Because if it's just that, I feel like we need to explore that more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's no judgment here. Like, there's all sorts of reasons why we don't date people who are good for us. They're too short, or they don't make enough money, or I have been told my whole life that this is not what relationships look like, so I'm not going to pursue this joy here, right? I mean, this is how we strip ourselves of connection is by following the conditioning that we have been told. So I think that I'm not trying to judge you here, because we all have like internalized, inherited beliefs about relationships. And especially when it comes to being a parent, when it comes to fucking surviving in an expensive city, I know these stresses are real and not superficial. And also, it feels like I want you to explore this more before you say no to this relationship, to make sure that you're saying no for reasons outside of money anxiety. You know, if you say no ultimately because of misaligned morals or misaligned life visions or goals or whatever, that feels like a little bit more earned for me. Does that make sense? And there's no judgment here. Like, we're all here at some point in our life in different circumstances.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think at the end of the day, right, you get to decide who you want to be with, and you get to decide why you want to be with them or not be with them. Like, that is your prerogative. And I'll also name that when we place these sort of expectations on other people, we limit who's in our life.
Yes.
Right. And like Sierra said, we can turn down some really amazing people because of one thing or two things or whatever it might be. And I know that you're really sort of focused on this idea of like, I'm not going to swallow my doubt anymore. And doubt is in every relationship. Always, right? Like, not like big doubt, not like, oh my God, should I leave this person because they're doing this horrible thing to me, right? But like, we can't live our lives without having moments of wondering or having moments of thinking, what could it be if it weren't this, right? Like, those are all really normal things to do. So I don't want you to swallow your doubt, because it sounds like that's like something that you have been doing, especially big doubts, big red flags, big concerns in order to make other people happy. But that doesn't mean that we need to look at every single doubt and say, this is just as big as all of the other doubts I've ever had, right? Sometimes it can just be, ooh, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety about the idea that we're not making as much money as I thought we were. Like, that is a real legitimate, understandable thing to be concerned about, to have anxiety, like to have that surprise and be like, oh, this is different than I thought it was. Is this the right relationship for me? I think is a really normal thing to think, right? And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong inherently with the relationship that you need to like run away from. It just means that you have new information that's changing your perspective of what this relationship is or isn't. And you deserve it to yourself, and I think to the relationship, to spend some time digging into whether or not this like this feeling of anxiety that you are having is coming from a place of like instability in the relationship, or if it's coming from a place of you sort of thinking about and experiencing understandable anxiety around money. And if you're experiencing that anxiety and you're looking at this person and still saying, I love you, I want to be with you, you're really hot, you're funny, right? Like, you want to be in my kid's life, you treat me really well. So what do we need to do to collectively to help me work through this anxiety that I'm experiencing around what our financial present and future is going to look like? What sort of conversations, what sort of work do we need to do together to help make sure that we can support each other and move through this period of anxiety that I'm experiencing, having learned something different about what our financial situation is than what I thought it was?
I think that's beautiful. All right, my darling. We hope that this helps. We believe in you. We believe in your ability to make authentic, self-driven decisions. Like, we believe in whatever choice you make over this. And we know that you'll make the right one for yourself. We hope this helps.
For listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like to join us for our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you get access to those monthly office hours. This is when Sierra and I hop on Zoom with anyone who is a patron, and we just have conversation, answer questions as they come up, tell lots of funny jokes, dig into the chat. If you are interested in joining us, our next Patreon office hours are on July 28th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central. Please join us. They're so much fun. It is absolutely worth the $5 a month that you
I think so.
would give us on Patreon. Like the office hours themselves are
The
worth
hidden
it.
gem.
And then also, and then you also get access to a free weekly episode, you also get access to a weekly bonus episode, as well as access to the back catalog of like hundreds of other episodes.
Yeah.
Like,
And if you don't like
so
to
much
listen to the
content.
ads, there's ad-free versions of our primary.
Yes, all of this. We know that not everyone can afford $5 a month. That is totally fine. We still love you and appreciate your listenership. But if you are interested in getting access to any of those perks, please join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DM, send us your favorite relationship meme, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music. And remember, sometimes our morals get confused with our anxieties, and our anxieties get confused with our fears. Take some time to be curious about what you're feeling. Trace where those feelings are coming from, whether they were something you were taught, whether they were something you inherited, whether they were something you experienced. And use that curiosity to give yourself some compassion. It'll help you make these hard decisions moving forward. And if all else fails,
Just break up.